Hello, my name is Meredith Reed, and I am a senior at Upper Iowa University. And this is my senior project for my paper, Psychology of a Killer. So, the purpose of my paper was to discuss notorious serial killers and mass killers that have suffered from psychological disorders in order to identify possible patterns in their psyche that could help us to identify others at risk. Also, I wanted to establish a feasible plan which we were able to identify and treat mental disorders early enough in the hopes of preventing those traits from manifesting into heinous crimes. So the first thing I had to do was define a killer. So I took serial killers as to be one who commits at least 3 murders or other homicidal acts with a cooling off period ranging from any length of time from days to years. So they could kill one person one day, 20 years later, kill some more people, as long as there were 3 murders. That would define them as a serial killer. For mass killers, these are people who kill 4 or more people in one event without a cooling off period. So they don't take any time in between. They go in and create one massive event. So some of the documented psychological disorders and known killers that I chose to research were schizophrenia, borderline personality disorder, antisocial personality disorder, depression and severe anxiety, Asperger's syndrome and anxiety, and depression and suicidal ideations. So when schizophrenia came along, I looked into Edward Theodore Jean, known as the Butcher of Plainsville, Wisconsin. And he was actually the inspiration for the movies such as Psycho, Silence of the Lambs, and the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. Ed was born in 1960 in Wisconsin, and he had an alcoholic, abusive father who did very little to support the family or help the family out. His mother was also abusive, but she was more of the overbearing and controlling of her 2 sons. Ed was bullied for the speech impediment that he had and an eye overgrowth that caused him to leave school after the 8th grade when he chose to drop out. So in 1944, Ed's brother Henry died under suspicious circumstances after kind of realizing that his mother and Ed's relationship was extremely unhealthy, and he kind of brought that up. So when the police looked into his brother's death, it caused by fire, they absolutely suspected Ed, but due to evidence, they were really unable to prove that he had anything to do with it. So he just remained suspicious. So after his death, and Ed's took just like another turn for the worse because his mother died about a year later. So Ed had killed several women, and then what was really weird and strange about some of his stuff was he actually was a person who would go and dig up graves and would steal body parts and then go home and make shrines and furniture that he would keep in his house, and he would also leave his mother's room in kind of like a shrine to her. So in 1958, when police finally caught on to Ed, he was charged and spent 10 years in a mental ward. So in the mental institution, he became a model citizen. He received treatment, and he had no other issues where he ever had any absurd behaviors. He seemed to have taken well to treatment and was essentially never heard from again. Also, a person who falls under the schizophrenia category would be James Egan Holmes. He's known as the Batman shooter from Aurora, Colorado. So he was born December 13th, 1987 in San Diego, California. He was an extremely intelligent young man. He was a neuroscience PhD student at the University of Colorado. And he had received medical attention for psychological issues 3 times before the actual incident occurred at the movie theater. And once he dropped out of school, none of those healthcare professionals who were alerted to some of his strange behaviors or issues ever followed up with him. So he dropped out of school, and on July 20th, 2012, he killed 12 people and injured 70 in a movie theater in Aurora, Colorado. So once he went to trial, he pled insanity, but he was diagnosed as schizophrenic, and then they said that he was actually during one of his episodes at the time of the killings. He was sentenced to 12 consecutive life sentences plus 3,318 years without parole. So under the borderline personality disorder, a very notorious killer was Jeffrey Dahmer, who was called the Milwaukee Cannibal. So he was born in 1960 in Wisconsin. He actually had an outstanding, like, normal, average American childhood. He committed his first murder for the first time at 18 years old, and then he took an 8-year break in service, so that classifies him as a serial killer. He was very interested in the anatomy of animals, and his parents were kind of weirded out by some of his unusual behaviors. He grew up, went to high school. He did have issues furthering college. He was not able to sustain his education or maintain a career in the military due to his alcoholism. So he was an active serial killer from 1978 to 1991. Some of his crimes included rape, murder, dismemberment, necrophilia, and cannibalism. So he would lure young gay men to his home with the promise of money for if they would take photographs for him, and he would drug them and then want to investigate their anatomy. So his total death toll was 17 males, and he had a lot of the body parts in his home and even experimented with trying to eat some of them in the hopes of getting rid of the evidence. And he was diagnosed with a borderline personality disorder, and he died in prison when he was attacked by another prisoner. For antisocial personality disorder, John Wayne Gacy, also known as Pogo the Clown, was someone who I looked into. He was born in 1942 in Chicago, Illinois. He was an outstanding member of the community, very active with dressing up as a clown and going to children's homes and hospitals, and everyone liked him, knew great things about him. So he was severely abused along with his mother while he was growing up from his father. He also experienced bullying in school because of his health and his weight. And he was an active serial killer from 1972 to 1978. He was found guilty of torture, rape, and the murder of 33 males. And he left all but a couple of those bodies underneath his house in a crawl space, and he just left them there to rot. And that was essentially how he was caught whenever he was questioned, and they could actually smell the dead bodies. He was diagnosed with antisocial personality disorder in 1968, and he was sentenced to death and did die from a lethal injection in 1994. For depression and severe anxiety, I looked into Seong-Hui Cho from the Virginia Tech shooter. So this is, again, another extremely intelligent person. He was born in 1984 in South Korea, but he and his family migrated to the United States when he was 8 years old. He attended the Virginia Tech University, and there were several occasions where he was referred to mental health professionals for concerns of harming himself and others, where it was self-reported by some of his roommates and people who knew him. So when he would go into the doctors, he would say, no, I was just joking, and the doctors actually failed to even assess him, and they just let him go and never provided any follow-up at all with him. He also had some trails of evidence of some of the things that he was thinking about doing through social media and his violent idealizations. On April 16, 2007, he was armed with 2 handguns, and he fired 170 rounds in 9 minutes into his fellow students. And he killed 32 people and injured 17 before committing suicide. For Asperger's syndrome and anxiety, I took a look at Adam Lanza from the Sandy Hook Elementary School shooter. He was diagnosed with Asperger's syndrome and anxiety. His mother chose not to even have him treated. She allowed him to go into this state of withdrawal where he would stay in his room for months on end, and he would just play violent video games, watch violent TV relentlessly. There was one point where he made his mother communicate with him via the computer. So he actually, on December 14, 2002, he shot and killed his own mother, and then he went to the Sandy Hook Elementary School, where he then shot and killed 20 students between the ages of 5 and 10 years old, and 6 adults. Adam also committed suicide at the school. So Demetrius is one of the most recent school shootings, and this happened in Santa Fe, Texas, on May 18th of 2018. He was a 17-year-old junior at Santa Fe High School. He did experience some bullying from fellow students and some of the coaches. He showed the typical signs of withdrawal and depression. His social media pages showed that he was a Nazi supporter, and he actually showed a lot of signs on social media of possible violent behavior and planning. He had not ever been officially diagnosed, and I assume that that's something that's going to be coming out in the near future. So like I said, on May 18th, he went and shot and killed 10 people and wounded 13. A lot of the witnesses there at the school say that he was very selective about those that he was seeking to injure and hurt. And another very fascinating thing about this case is his parents are currently defendants in lawsuits by some of the other students who were killed, because they say that his parents failed to acknowledge the warning signs and act. So wearing shirts on social media that say born to kill and taking photos of a gun and a knife, they feel like his parents are liable. So now that we've kind of looked at those and we've talked to those and we've identified some characteristics and found some commonalities, I want to start talking about the prevention phase. So the prevention phase is going to consist of social media monitoring, preventing bullying, and early psychological testing. So the use of social media as a monitor source is extremely crucial, because a lot of these school shootings, they all posted things on social media that absolutely gave signs and symptoms that they were planning on doing the heinous things that they did. And so whenever we start monitoring social media, we're able to start preventing people from following through with these types of crimes. Also, I think ensuring parents are held responsible for their children's action will absolutely help to accomplish accountability and make sure that parents are active in what it is that their children are doing and are providing them guidance and letting them know that there are consequences for their actions and that they step in and start paying attention to help prevent these kind of behaviors. Also, if we kind of add psychological testing early in children to identify those that may be at risk for psychological disorders and harmful actions, it can be a great prevention tools. A lot of the people I talked about experience really difficult childhoods. And so if we could start identifying those students and just making sure that they have resources available to them and people are concerned and care, I feel like that would do wonders as far as what is going on in the world today. Also, something else is we have to focus on consistent treatment. A lot of the cases, the lack of follow-up is the real reason to blame. So how we can control consistent treatment would be to ensure affordable, consistent treatment is available. We also need to do some kind of a tracking database where people have exhibited the will to harm others, that they are actually tracked and monitored. We do that for people with drug charges, felonies, pedophiles. I don't understand how we can't do that for people who are at risk of causing mass murders. Also, we need to really work on, as a community, prescription affordability. So if we could start getting the government to fund to allow everyone access to mental health professionals and ensure resources are available to all, it would be the most crucial part in this whole thing, because schools need to have those resources available where they can follow up with students and check and see if students need any help and if there's any way that they can step in and help alleviate bullying or anything like that. So the database that I was kind of discussing is where people who have posed a risk to themselves or have made comments or are believed to be willing to commit mass crime against other people, they should be tracked. That way there's a reminder system that, hey, we need to follow up with these people, because a lot of the mass shooters that we have talked about were never, ever, ever checked on again. It was just forgotten until they did an extremely heinous act. Also, requiring the pharmaceutical companies to ensure their prescription drugs are affordable is crucial. Those receiving treatment are less at risk than someone left untreated. Jeffrey Dahmer and Jean are both great examples of once people were in the system and they were treated and they were followed up on and they were guided on a path, they no longer carried out any of the crimes that they were obviously guilty of. And we are going and spending so much government funding on the cleanup effort. So after these schools are being shot up, then we're providing the survivors with the treatment. Whenever we could just do it in the initial phase instead of the cleanup effort. So in conclusion, this was basically a study of notorious serial killers and mass murderers to prove that there are almost always precursors that indicate someone may be at risk or planning a crime, and that we have to start paying attention to those. Also, we have to use our preventative measures, such as like the psychological resources, government funding, and the monitoring of social media to ensure that people with untreated mental illnesses get the proper treatment that they require in an effort to prevent any later homicidal episodes. This is extremely important, and you do it in such a way that they don't feel like they are singled out, but that they realize that they're cared for and their health is extremely important to everyone. So thank you so much, and I appreciate your time.